Welcome to this beautiful and awesome lesson. Guys, in this episode, we'll be looking at arrays. Okay, so the concept of array is very vital. Okay, now what is array? As a layman point of view, array is just a container that holds similar data. Okay, so for instance, we can create an array of numbers, arrays of students' names, arrays of floats, whatsoever. Okay, so the gurus in programming, they always look at the way forward for making programming become more easier and the concept become more simple. Okay, so that is why they also come with an array. With that array, all what we be left with is what? A variable. For instance, let's say we are building an application that can check the age of students. In a class of 20 students, we are building an application to check the age of the students and also sum them, okay, to add all of them together. How are you going to do this one? So let's say, yes, we can do this with the help of variable, okay? So we can go ahead and do what? Int age 1. Then we create another one called what? Int age 2. Then another one called int age 3. Then another one called what? Int age 4. We have to do this one what? 20 times. What if the numbers of students are 100? We are going to create this 100 times. We are going to create integers 100 times before you start doing your calculations. So with the help of an array, okay, you can create one array, and with that one array, you put all the content, okay. Let's say you put all the integers inside one array. It is not actually an integer. So when I was teaching my previous students from JavaScript class, so I make them understand that array, just consider array to be a variable that contains multiple data, okay. A single variable that can hold a multiples of data or a multiples of variables at a go. Okay, let's say you create one variable that can host about thousands of variables inside one variable, but actually it's not a variable. Okay, it differs from a variable. All right, so the long story short, let's get to coding and see how we can create array and understand the concept better. All right, so now before we move on, let's understand the similarity of the integer, function, and array. Okay, so as we all know, this is how we create a variable. Okay, and in the same manner, if you want to create a function, this is how we create a function. Okay, so this is also how we create an array in the short form. So we can see this one use what? Parentheses, and this one use what? Square brackets. Okay, the array goes with what? A square bracket. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and create an array. So here we do what? Int age, then we put here our square bracket. Okay, then inside the square bracket, you are to put in the numbers of elements that you want your array to hold. Okay, so for instance, I want my array to hold 5 elements. Okay, so I'll say then equals to, then here I will use my curly braces, okay, or curly brackets. Then I'll put in the actual elements. Okay, so here I said I've created an array that can hold 5 elements. That's why I've put 5 here. So it shouldn't be more than 5, okay, because I put 5 here. So now what are the elements that I want my arrays to hold? Then I will say, okay, let's make it simple. 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Okay, so these are the elements that I want my array to hold. That is the 5 elements. All right, so now before you can be able to access any of the contents inside your array, okay, these items, if you want to access any of the contents here, okay, maybe 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, we have to know the index number. Okay, so the second concept of creating an array is what? The index number. Okay, so by default, anytime you create an array like this, okay, by default the compiler gives your array an index number. Okay, so it is a unique number given to each of the items inside the array, and these are the numbers. The compiler by default will give the first one 0, and the next one will follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The compiler will automatically give your elements inside your array a unique identifier called an index. Okay, so anytime you create an array, the first element automatically will be given a unique number of 0 or an index number of 0 followed by the rest. So if this one here is 0, then here will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, please get this one and don't forget. All right, so now that you understand this concept, let's see how we can print out any of the values in here. Let's say we want to print the 40. Okay, so let's say we want to print 40. So how do we do that? We can do that with the help of the index number. Okay, and remember the index number, we did not give it, it has been given automatically. Okay, it has been given by default. All right, so we do what? Cout, then we say age. So after we call the age, then we call our square bracket like this. Then we put in the index. Okay, so what will be the index? 0, 1, 2, 3. We are printing the 40. So what will be the index of the 40? It will be what? 0, 1, 2, and 3. It will be 3, not 4. Okay, it's 3. Now let's put in 3 like this. All right, so let's end the line. Okay, let's run this program and see the output. And we can see that we have 40 here. Okay, we have 40. Why are we having 40? It's because the index of the 10 is 0, the index of 20 is 1, the index of 30 is 2, and the index of 40 is 3. Okay, so if you want to print the 50, okay, if you want to print the value of the 50, then we give what? We give 4. When you run this code like this, you see 50 being printed out. Please don't forget, this is the basic concept that you must understand. If you get this one, then you've been able to catch the first concept of array. Okay, so now the concept of the data types also is more important to understand, because for instance, if we are creating an integer variable, this is an integer variable, okay, that's why we use int. Okay, so now if you change this one here, if you make this one a float variable, okay, then we have to change this whole place. I think my compiler was saying something. So you can see cannot narrow to an int. Okay, so you can see that we are using an int. So immediately I put in something like this, it's telling us that it doesn't work that way. So what do? If you want to go by a float, or if you want to go by decimal, just go ahead and use your float and you are good to go. Okay, all right, so with this you are good to go. And then again, you can access multiple values. Okay, it's not only one that you can access at a time. You can access multiples of them at a time. Okay, so something like this. And when you run it, we see that we have 50, 10, and 40 on the screen. Now, I might say that this is not the only way that you can declare your arrays. Okay, you can declare your arrays on a long way. This is a shorthand of doing this. Okay, so let me show you how to do it also on the long hand. Okay, so like the way we declare a variable like this. Okay, like this. Okay, before maybe we come here, then we say in the same method we can also declare an array like that. Okay, so now let's look at the second method of declaring an array. Okay, let me comment this one. Now, I've commented this one. Let's look at the second way of declaring an array. It could be an integer or float, okay? So let me go by integer. So I said int age. For this one, it must come, okay, your square bracket, and put the value, okay, the value, like 5, 10, 3, 2, however you want it. So I put in 5, okay? Then I'll end the line like this. I'll use my column like this. Then I'll come to the next line. On the next line, I'm to declare the index number myself. Even though you are typing by yourself, but it must follow the same rules, okay? The first one must be what? 0. All right, so I said age, which is having an index number 0, it should have a value of what? 10. Okay, then I'll go to the next line. I say age, which is having an index number of 1, should have what? 20. Then I will say age, which will be having an index number of 2, to have a value of what? 30. Then I'll say age, which will be having index number of 3, must have a value of 40, and age, which is having an index number of 4, should be having a value of what? 50. Okay, as simple as that. Now, before you go, I'll ask you to check it by yourself. Okay, writing your array or declaring your array in a context like this, or declaring it in a context like this, which one will you prefer? Which one will you prefer? It's a choice. So for me, I prefer the first one because it is easier and more understandable. Other programmers prefer it this way because they don't want to get confused with the index number. So with this one, they are so conscious about the index number because it has been declared. Okay, they are seeing it vividly. Okay, so they prefer it this way. But for me, I think this one is better. All right. Now the next line of question is, how can we write a code to print all the values without repeating the code? Okay, without repeating the code, like C out, then we do what? Age, then C out, then we do age, then we call the index like this, and we come again and do C out, then we do age, then we call our square bracket, then we call the index, then we end the line again, then we come again and do C out. Is there not a way out that we can print all these values without writing a multiple lines of code? Is there not a way out? And for sure, there is a way out. Okay, so we can do this one with the help of what? For loop. Okay, we can write a loop to loop out and print out all the values at a go. So how do we do that? So we say for. Remember, we are writing a for loop. Okay, we say for. Then we said I'll create a variable of index. Okay, and I'll set index to 0. Then I'll say this index is less than 5. Why this index is less than 5? Then I will say what? Index, which is I plus plus. Now, why this index is less than 5? I said this index is to be less than 5 because 4 is less than 5. Okay, the last value here is what? 4, and it is less than 5. Okay, now whenever you are writing a loop, okay, to check or to print out the values in your array, always make your index, okay, always make your integer here 0, okay. Set it equal to 0, okay, and make sure the index is less than the value that you give to your array, okay. All right, make sure it is less than this value, okay, and you are good to go. Now the next steps is that you have to, so on this line we will do what C out, then we say what age, and with our square bracket. Now let me end the line before I'll come and put in the value there. Now with this square bracket, we are not putting any other thing than what? The I, which is the index, okay? We are putting in the I. Okay, so by doing this, let's print it and see what we have. All right, so before we print it, we are having some error here, okay? We have to end this line like this. Now let's go ahead and print it. Let's run the code and see the output. And there we go. We can see that we have what 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Okay, we can see that we have them printed out nicely here for us. All right, so at this point, I hope you truly understand whatever is going here, okay, the concept here. Now, arrays and for loops, they work hand in hand, okay, because it is most likely that whenever you see an array, you see a loop, okay, you see a loop, either be a while loop or for loop, but most often it's for loop, okay. So when we started building some applications, games and applications, you will see how we are merging the arrays and the loops together, the for loops together to do a lot of magic in our project. All right, so before we go, I might say that if you want to increase this one, okay, let's say if you put the value here to be 6, then it means that you are going to be adding another. It means that you are going to be adding another, which is what, 5, and maybe we set it to what, 60 or anything, okay, at all. Then it means here also we have to increase it to what, 6. All right, so you can put any value at all here. It could be 100, okay. When you put in 100, then it means that the elements that we are going to put in here also might be what, 100, okay. All right, but the index always will look like it has been shorted 1, but it is still the same, okay, because it's counted from 0, not from 1. All right, so I hope you truly enjoy this lesson and also understand the concept very well. Okay, so that will be all for now. Till we meet again, happy coding. Let's meet on the next one and learn more. Welcome back to this beautiful and awesome lesson. Guys, we are still on array, okay? And specifically, we are looking at char array. Like I said before, with an array, okay, it also comes with the data types, okay, like how we create the data types with an integer. We have a string data type, we have an integer, float, and co, okay. We also have a char, okay. So in the case that we don't want to use strings, we don't want to create an array with a string, but we can also do that also with the char, okay. So and they all also come with their rules. So let's understand also how the char also works, okay. In most cases we might not be using it, however we still have to understand the concepts, okay. In case you want to use it also, you are good to go. All right, so let's dive in. All right, so now we will say char the name, then we come with what, our square bracket, okay, with our square bracket like this, okay. Now I am setting it to a name, okay. Let me use my name, Joseph. Okay, so Joseph carry how many letters here? Joseph, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So Joseph carries out 6 letters, okay, like this. Now let's end the line like this, and then we come here, then we do what, see out, then we say my name, then I will do what, name. Then let me end the line first before I explain. Number one rule that you need to understand is that when you're creating a child array and you want to print everything inside, okay, we want to print everything here, we don't bring a square bracket, okay, unlike an integer or a float array that will bring a square bracket, then we specify the index that we want to print, okay, either being 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 5 or 6. In child array, we don't do that, okay. If you want to print all, we don't do that. We just have to specify the array name, okay, and you are good to go. Now I have set my Xcode, my editor, I have set it to check any error whilst I'm still coding it, to check any error and report it at a go. That's why you are seeing that we're having some issues here. Now when I try to run this, I'll have an issue, okay. We can see that build failed, it couldn't run. It's like all things are perfect in my code, but still I'm having an issue here, okay. Why am I having an issue? That leads out to the second rule that you must understand when you're using a child array. Now the alphabets here are 6, okay, but the rules that govern the child array is that the value that you give here, you must add 1 to it, okay. It must be over the alphabet that you put here, okay. So here is 6, so a normal circumstance here is supposed to be 6, but with a child array I must add 1 to it, making what, 7. You ask me why. Even myself, I don't know why. That is the rule. Okay. So in programming, there are some rules that you need to follow. Like for instance, as I explained that the compiler read our code from the top to bottom. It's a rule. You don't need to understand it. It's a rule. Okay. All right. So this also is a rule governing what the child array. When you set in 6 here, then you have to what add 1 to it, making 7. So if I put in Joseph, so let's say Joseph Asante, then making how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, another 6. So instead of 12, if I put 12, I will still have an error. Okay, so instead of 12, I have to make it what 13. Okay, before I will have this days be printed out. All right, so now let's use the same case study. Okay, then I put in here 7. If I run the code now you can see that I'm having the result. Okay, my name is Joseph. Okay, it's here. My name is Joseph. Okay, awesome. Now, in a case that I want to print only the first letter, then what do? I will only have to come with a square bracket. Then I will give an index number of what? 0. Okay, 0. Now let's print it out. Running the code. And there we go. We can see that we have our JB printed out successfully. Okay, awesome. All right. Now that is how it works. Okay, so if you want to print the O, you know what to put. Okay, you put in 1. If you want to put print the S, you put in port 2, and it goes on and on. Now, so if you want to print the whole thing, then you omit everything, okay, and leave it by default. Now you can see we were able to print everything then without writing any loop. Okay, we did not write any for loop, but we were able to print everything here. That is the uniqueness of the char also. So in these cases, some also prefer using the char. Okay, now let's make this one more dynamic. Okay, in doing so, we will not assign anything. We leave it here by default, and here let's put in 50. Okay, now we are going to make it dynamic. We want the user to type the name. Okay, so we do what? See out. What is your name? And remember, we have to put it in a quotation. Okay, now what is your name? Let's end it. Then we do what? See into what? Name. And check it again. Here I did not come with what? Any square bracket. Okay, I did not put in anything here because we want the person to see the full name that he types. Okay, so we don't want any square brackets here. Okay, all right, so now let's run the code and see the output. Now what is your name? Then I type my name, Joseph. Then when I hit enter, it says what? Your name is Joseph. Awesome. Now let's run the code one more time and let me show you something. Now what is your name? Then I type in Joseph Asante. Like this. When I hit enter, it's what? Your name is Joseph. Why is my name Joseph? Why is I type Joseph Asante? Okay, so the reason being is that our code can only print out one name. Immediately see a space line, it cannot fathom it. Okay, maybe a space before the name, it cannot fathom it. Okay, so let's run the code one more time and let me show you something. So now when we type in what is your name, then I say Joseph, no space, okay, Asante, and I hit enter. You can see that your name is Joseph Asante. So when I bring my same name with a space, then the code cannot fathom it. So what do we do? Is there a possibility of fixing it? Yes, there's a possibility. Then what do we do? Then here, okay, C in, okay, this C in, I'll just put in a code like this, okay. So I'll do C in dot get, okay, C in dot get. Inside the dot get, I put in a parenthesis. The name, I'll surround it with a parenthesis, okay. Then I'll bring a comma here. Then I'll specify the value of the array, okay, which is the 50. So I'll not put it in a square bracket, but I'll just put it 50 like this. You only have to understand it. So I'll not need this line here. I'll bring the line. I'll not need this line here. Now the double less than sign, I wouldn't need it here, okay. It will be something like this, okay. Now all things be equal, let's run it and see. Now what is your name? Then I will say Joseph Asante. Joseph Asante, okay. When I hit enter, now we can see that your name is Joseph Asante. Awesome, awesome. All right, so that will be all for this episode. Let's meet on the next episode and learn more. Thank you. Hello guys, welcome back to this one. In this episode, we are looking at more advanced calculator. Okay, we are building our third calculator, and this one is going to be more advanced. Now, we are going to build series of calculators, okay, and as we are progressing, we will build more advanced ones, okay. So now, with the skills that we have accumulated, we are going to combine some of them and to build this calculator and see how it is. But before you move on, okay, let me explain some concepts which is not new, but maybe you might not be familiar with it. Let me explain it because I might be using it whilst we are still progressing. Okay, so now let me create an integer variable of x and assign it to what, 10, and let me do the same thing for y, and I'll assign it to 20. All right, now here I'll say x equals x plus y. I hope you understand this one. Okay, when I say x equals x plus y, whatever the value of x and y is, okay, we are summing it to what, x. Okay, so if you print this one on the screen, we are going to get 30, as you know. Okay, so when you say C out, when you check the value of x, sure, for sure we are going to get 30. Okay, and there we go, we have 30 as expected. Okay, so now the new concept that I want to understand is this. Okay, now for you to write this code in this longhand, there's a shorter way also you can write this code. Remember when we were doing the post increment, okay, that we do maybe x plus plus. Okay, yeah, and I explained that with that one also, it means what, x plus x equals y. Okay, so now in the same concept that we are using to find a shorter way of writing this code. Okay, and to do that is very simple. So the shorter way of writing this code, it will be what, it will be x plus equal to y. Okay, x plus equal to y. Okay, now let me comment this one. Now if you see this one, this one here is the same as this one. Okay, so if you see me using this one, it's the same as this one. You can see that I've commented the longhand, so now I'm using the shorthand. So if I run this one, we are going to get the same result on the screen. Okay, now you'll be seeing me using this one the more, and most programmers like to use the shorthand because in algorithms we all look at the shortest way of getting the same results. All right, it is not only this one that we can do. We can, as we see on your screen, we can do it for the division, the multiplication, and also the division and subtraction. Okay, so the same concept here, and they are all the same. And so this is the concept that I want you guys to catch on before we move on to today's activity. Now let's move on to today's activity. All right, so we are building our advanced calculator. Okay, I'll be needing 3 variables. Okay, so now I'll start with a float, and I will name it what, variable, and I'll move on to create my int variable, and this one I'll call it number of inputs. Okay, you number of inputs. Okay, let's leave it like this. Then let's create another one which is float, then we call it what, total. Okay, now I'll assign the total to 0, and with the number of inputs I'll assign that one also to 0, but for the variable I would like the user to type it themselves. Okay, so I'll leave this one by default. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is that when the program runs, we want to tell the user to enter the first value. Okay, all right, so now we'll do what, C out, please enter the first value. Okay, it's a string. Okay, so we have to put it in the quotation, something like this. Please enter the first value. Let's end the line, and we will do C in. So we will C into what, variable. All right, so this one is self-explanatory. I don't need to explain this one because you already understand it. All right, let's move on. So now the next thing to do is to create a loop. Okay, and we can go for for loop, but for some reason I would like to us to use while loop, because with while loop you understand the steps. Okay, when we truly understand it, then later we can convert it to for loop. Okay, so now let's move on. So we create a while loop, and with the while loop, the argument that we are passing in is what, the number of inputs. Okay, number of inputs, and we are assigning to what, let's say less than 1000. If the input that the user will put is less than 1000, then okay, so you see 0 is less than 1000, right? So the loop will run. Okay, so when the loop run for the first time, what you want to do is you will say number of inputs plus plus. Now it will increase it by 1, and it will go on and on. Okay, so we say number of input what, plus plus. All right, now what we are doing here is that when you run the code, this one will be shown on the screen. Enter your first value. When the user enter the first value, then this number of inputs will run. Like after you go through the process, this number of inputs will run for the first time. When it runs for the first time, here will become 1. When it runs for the second time, here will become 1. It's like the user stand a chance of running the program for 1000 times, which nobody will do that. Okay, so we don't want the loop to stop. Okay, so we want this condition here to remain true so that the code will keep on running. Okay, so if the user stay on our application and run the code for 1000 times, then I think it is enough. Okay, let's say if it's a game, We cannot be given another chance to try the game, try the game for 1,000 times. It's too much. We can equally reduce it here. If you make it 10, the user stand a chance to try the application for 10 times. Maybe after first one, you get the result, then you want to try again. Then the second time, you get the result, and you want to try again. So the concept is just like that. You don't worry. Let's move on. Whilst we are still progressing, you get it better. Okay, so the next thing that I'll do is that I will do total cross equal to variable. This place would be somehow confusing for you, but you don't have to be confused. Okay, so factors like this, that is why I was explaining the concept of, let me put a comment. That's why I was explaining the concept of x plus equals y. Okay, now we know that x plus equals y is the same as what? It's the same as s equals x plus y. Okay, and with the same concept, total plus equals variable means what? It means total equals total plus variable. Okay, so it's like something like this. Okay, all right. So what we are trying to mean is that whatever total is, okay, now we are assigning what? The variable, which is here. The variable is what the user will put. Okay, so we are summing the variable with the total. So now, what is the total now? All right, so now that you understand this concept, let's clear this one. So total equals total plus variable. What is total now? Total is 0, okay? And what is variable? Variable is what the user will input, okay? So now we assign the new value of total to be what? This total plus what the user would what? Input. So let's say if the user type in 2, then the total will be what? 2. If the user type in 10, the total will be 10 because we've set total to what? To 0. So anything that the user will type, that one rather will become what? Total. So that is what we are having here. Total equals total plus variable. Okay. All right. Now let's move on. Now, as it stands now, if you run the code, what are you going to get? For it to be more visible, let's say C out, then we say what total. Let's end the line. Now, as it stands now, when you run the code, what are you going to get? We are going to get the code running how many times? It's going to run 1,000 times. Okay. It's going to run 1,000 times. Yes. Because when you run for the first time, the total will become 1. Then it will go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 will be till you get what 1,000 before the condition will become what false. Because 1,000 will not be less than 1,000. So that is where the condition become false. Then it will stop. So now let's run the code and let me show you. Now enter your input. When I say 10, you can see it's going to run 1,000 times. Okay, you can see here it's running 1,000 times. Okay, so 10, 20, 30, 40. It's run how many times? 1,000 times. You can see 1,000 here. Awesome, awesome. Now let's move on. All right, so the next code that we write is what? We'll do C out. Then we say what? Please enter the next value. And we end it like this. And we are seeing the next value to be variable. You might be having a question here. Why are we seeing the next value to variable? Because the first value we give it to the variable. So why are we still seeing the next value to the variable? So what we do is that this our input is going to override the first one. Okay. I hope you understand that concept. Okay, so now it's going to override the first one. Okay, so you just get it like that. So when the code run for the first time, the total will be what the input that the user will put in for the variable. Okay, so the total is going to be total plus variable. What is going to be is that whatever total is, now total is 0, whatever the user would input, being 10, 20 or whatsoever, that is going to be our new total because the total here is 0. So even when I added it, it will be the same value. Okay, so when the code run for a second time, whatever we are going to put in here is going to overwrite the first variable that we have created. Okay, all right, so now let's run the code. Now here we can see we said we should enter our first value. When you put in a 10 and hit enter, enter the next value, it will repeat itself like that. And enter the next value, enter the next value, enter the next value. Okay, so what has happened here is that the value that we are putting in here, okay, it is going to be adding up to the total. Okay, any value that you are putting here is going to be adding up to the total. Okay, it's going to be adding up to the total, and this will continue till the user tried it for how many times? For 1,000 times. That is what we set it here. So till the user try it for 1,000 times, it is not going to end. Okay, but it's not really even we set it for 1,000 times, but it should be functional in a way that maybe I want only 5 inputs. Okay, or I want only 3 inputs. Okay, so it should be functional that way, that maybe when I type it for the third time and I am okay, the loop must stop. Okay, it must stop and give me the result. Okay, all right. So let's see how we can do that. All right. All right. So now let's add more conditions to end it whenever the user wants to end it. Okay. Here I will add, please enter the next value or enter -1 to end the program. All right. When it happens like this, then it means that when the user enter -1, then we are going to end the program. So we have to write an if statement to do that, okay, to make that one also work. So we'll do what? If the variable equals -1 equals -1. Remember, the equal to is double, okay? Then we say what? Break. Okay, something like this. Now, after we break it like this, okay, we stop the loop, we terminate the loop that way. Then the next thing is that we have to see something on the screen, okay? We have to see the summation and the number of inputs if you want to, and maybe the average of the values. Okay, so I will come here. You can see that I'm coming here, okay, because this is where the loop starts and this is where the loop ends, okay. This is for the what? The if statement. So I am coming here. I'm coming outside the while loop, okay, the ending of the while loop. So I'll come here, then I'll do cout, then I will say what? Let's put in some message here. The summation of those values is, then I'll say total, and I'll end it. Then I'll come here again. I'll do cout. Let me say number of inputs is, we also want to know the number of inputs, okay. So we say the number of input is, okay, so we say the number of input is, number of inputs, simple as that. Now let's end it. Number of inputs. Okay, now let's end it like this. Now I think we have to print the third one too. Okay, so we will say what? The average, sorry, is supposed to be in a quotation. Okay, so we say the average of those value is, the average of those value is what? Then we say total divided by what? Number of input, and we end it. All right, before anything, let's run the code, okay? Then I'll give you the final explanation. So now let's run it. Now enter the first value, we say what? 10. Enter the second value, we say 20, and enter the third value. We can put in anything, okay? You can put it in anything. I say 30. Okay, so 10, 20, 30. Let's say I am okay. I am okay. So now I want to terminate the code. You can see it says what? Enter the next value or enter -1 to end the program. Now I want to end the program, okay? I'm okay with my inputs. Now when I hit enter, look at the summation that I have. So the summation is what? 60. Why is it 60? 10 plus 20 will be 30. 30 plus 30 will give us what? 60. And how many times did we, how many input did we give? Okay, we type the numbers how many times? We type it 3 times. So that is what the number of inputs. So the number of input is what? 3. And the average of those value is 20. Why is it 20? The average is what? We set the average to be, you see here, we set the average to be what? The total divided by what? The number of inputs. So what is the total? The total is 60, okay, and the number of inputs is 3. So when you divided 60 by 3, that is why it is giving us what? The 20, okay. So the number of input is 3 and the total is 60. So 60 divided by 3 will give us what we are seeing on the screen. So it works on all, okay. Let's say we put in what? The first value, we say what? 5. The second value, we say 3. And the third value, we put in anything, we say 70, okay. So now let's end the program. So we said -1 to terminate the program, and we can see the result here, 78. Okay, 5 plus 3, 8 plus 70, 78. The total is 78, okay, and the number of input was 3, and the average of the value is 26, and it is the correct answer if you want to check it by yourself. You can see that here we set here to float, and we set here also to float, okay. So it means that we can have, let's input here 12, then let's input here let's say let's input here, let's say 80, and with the last number let's make it 15. Anything goes, okay, anything goes. You can go ahead and put anything, and let's terminate the program. And we can see I wanted to get a decimal, okay. So you can see this is the result, okay. This is the result, and we input it 3 times. So 3 divided by the total, which is the the summation, okay, will give us this. You can try with your calculator and you get exactly what you are seeing on your screen. Okay, I know it is a very bit complex, but just understand the concept and you are good to go. So I will urge you to understand it. Okay, don't do it for only once. Okay, so once we did it like this, I would like you to save the source code somewhere, then wipe everything from your editor. Okay, and start typing them by yourself. Okay, start typing them by yourself. If you forgot anything, you can go back to the code and refer. Okay, you can go back to the code and refer, but in as much as possible, don't be looking on it continuously. When something baffles your mind, you go back to the code, you refer, then you continue. So after you've been able to do it for the first time, then the second time you are trying it. Okay, you are trying it by yourself without even taking a single look on the code. Get the error, try to fix it by yourself. When you try this for about 5 times, the concept become more like very easy for you to get it. Okay, all right, so that will be all for now. Please keep on practicing. Okay, till we meet again. Happy coding. Hello guys, welcome back to this beautiful and awesome lesson. In this episode, we are building another calculator. Okay, on our previous episode, we were able to build this calculator, okay, which is looking awesome. Now we are going to add more functionalities to it. Okay, it's the same thing, but we are going to turn it and use an array, okay, to build this calculator. We use variables, okay, to build this, but now we are converting it to an array so that we will get much experience on how the arrays works better. Okay, all right, so without much ado, let's dive in. All right, so we are going to build our calculator in here, okay? And remember, on our previous one, this is what we got. I think it's better if I copy it and bring it here. Okay, it will be better this way. Okay, so this is how we started, okay? And so there's going to be a little changes here. Instead of float variable, now I'm going to use the word input. Okay, so I'll change it to an input, and remember I said we are going to use array. Okay, so I'll need a square bracket, something like this. Okay, inside this square bracket I am signing a value of 1000. Okay, that means that still the user has the chance to put in 1000 inputs like explained on our previous lesson. So now we are assigning the value here to what, to be 1000. All right, okay, let's add s to it. Okay, making inputs. Okay, so something like this. Now the next thing that we have to do is, on our previous project we have something like this, so let's copy it, then we convert it to how we want it. Okay, I definitely want you to understand the whole concept. That's why we are doing it this way. All right, now we said what, please enter, we see out, then we said please enter your first value, and we assign the first value to what, a variable. And for sure in this time we are no more using a variable, so we saw what, inputs. And in this time we'll call for the square brackets here, then we put in 0. Then you might be asking, why are you putting in 0? I am putting in 0 because the first input that the user will give, I want it to have the first index number. Okay, the 0 is the first index number. Remember arrays. Okay, the arrays, the first index number is 0. So the first input must carry the first index number, which is what, 0. I hope you understand it. All right, now let's move on. Yes, guys, I was asking myself, instead of putting here 0, why don't we put in the number of input? Because the number of inputs also is 0. Okay, I think that one rather will be better. Okay, so instead of 0, then we put in what, the number of input. Like I said before, the number of input is 0, so you put in rather here. All right, before we move on to the next step. Okay, so with the next step, I would like us to come here and copy the next step, which is what, the while loop. Okay, the while loop, like this. If you copy like this, we will have an issue because the open curly braces and the closing, okay, we will have an issue. But then we will still have to manage it, okay, because I want everything to be systematic. Okay, if you like, we can copy it like this. If you like, we can grab the whole thing here, then we begin to explain the concepts individually. If you like it this way, then let's do it this way. Okay, if you don't like it this way too, we can copy it shortly and later we explain. I think this one rather will give you a better understanding. Okay, so let's copy it here like this, then we move on to the next step. Okay, so this is the next step. So the next step is what, the while loop. Okay, so with the loop, you can see that we're having issues here. So for better implementation, let me close it here. Later, if you bring that one, we will see what to do. Let me close it here. Okay, yes, closing it here. All right, so that we will not be having more issues. Okay, so now remember we are converting it to an array. Okay, all right. So now we say what with a while loop. It says what while number of inputs is what is less than 1,000. Then what? Yes, will be total. I think this place rather will help you to understand it better. All right, so we just have to replace the variable with what an input. Remember, okay? So we say total plus equals input. Okay, total plus equals input. It doesn't end there. Okay, then we come with our square brackets. Then we put in here what number of inputs. I hope you understand. Okay, so number of inputs. Okay, so this time we are adding s to our inputs. We are doing like this because that's how we name it. Okay, all right, we can make it input without s, it will work. Okay, but it's just a naming convention. Okay, so that is why we are doing it like this. All right, so as we can see now, we are good to go. Okay, we have converted this line of code to this one. Okay, we have converted this line of code to this one. I think you understand it better if I bring this one rather here. Okay, yes, you understand it better this way. Okay, so once again, I think the only thing that will baffle your mind is the number of input that I put here. Okay, and also putting in here. Okay, so the number of input, it still stands for what? 0, and it still stands for the index. Okay, it's just like an index because the index also has the first number of input as 0. Okay, that is why we are putting in here. So if you wish to go by the 0, if you wish to go by the 0 like this, you are good to go. Okay, if you wish to go by the 0 like this, you are good to go. But on a more dynamic way, it must be like this. Okay, it must be like this. We are referring to what the number of inputs here. Okay, because the number of inputs start from 0. Okay, we set it 0, so it's the same as the index. Okay, so just understand this. All right, so now let's go to the next step. Okay, so the next step will be what the statement here. Okay, so we'll come here. Let's grab this one. Let's copy it and bring it here. All right, so now let's make the changes. Okay, so what do we have here? We have what? We can see that this one, the number of input is 0. Okay, so when the loop runs for the first time, it will change to 1. Okay, as we all know, when it runs, then it will change to 2. So it will be the same as the index number. Okay, changing its values. All right, please enter the next value or -1 to what to end the program, and just like that. Okay, so now we have to change this one from variable to what to input. And not only input, we have to also give it a square bracket like this. Then we put in what number of inputs like this. Awesome. Okay, now the differences between this one and this one is that with this one, when the loop runs and print out the result, it overwrites the former value of the variable, but this one is not going to overwrite it. Okay, it's not going to overwrite the variable, which is in our case is the input, but it is going to create a new index. Okay, it's like, you know, arrays deals with an index. Okay, with variable there was no index, that's why it was overwriting it. But with an array, it comes with an index, so the first value will be 0, so it will have its own printed out. But with the second value, it will create a new index number, which is I1, and give it value. Okay, so that it will not override the first one. So if because they have their unique identifier called the index, now it's not going to overwrite it because of the index number. Okay, all right, now let's move on to the next step. Now with the next step, you come here, let's grab this code. Let's grab this code here. All right, which is the if statement. Okay, and let's convert it. Okay, so here instead of variable, we say what if input, correct? But now it's an array, so we still need the square bracket. Then we say what the number of inputs, okay, is equal to less than 1, then break. Okay, now we are good to go. By doing this, we are good to go. Okay, there's an error here. It said what expected, which means we need one curly braces. Okay, it's because when we are copying the if statement, we do not grab this one. Okay, that is why it is giving us that error. We bring it here. You can bring it at the last, it doesn't really matter. It's like this. All right, please, if you are getting confused, then let me do it again. Okay, let me do it again. If you are not getting it, let me undo everything so that I'll copy it for you to know. Now I have to copy this one because this is the open and this is the closing. Okay, so I have to copy it like this and bring it here. Okay, something like this. All right, let me indent the code proper. Proper indentation is very important. Okay, so now what we do here is what if inputs, then in a square bracket we say what number of inputs. If the number of inputs is equal to -1, then terminate the program. Okay, so when the user type in -1, then you have to break the loop. Okay, the loop must stop. Okay, the loop starts here and ends here. Okay, so you can see here. So we'll come out from the loop, then we print out whatever that you want to see on the screen being here. Okay, this places. So now we grab this code, then here also we input it, then we modify it. All right, so we have a few things to correct. Now the input, we add s to it, so we just have to add s to it. This one too, we have to just add s to it, and we are good to go. That is just that. All right, so as it stands now, we're able to convert this one, which is our normal variable calculator. We're able to convert it to what? To an array. Okay, all right, but before anything, let's run the code and see the result. Now enter your first value, like the first one. We say 10, 10, and 10, 30. Okay, now I am terminating the code, so I type -1 and hit enter, and look at what we have. 30, the number of input was 3, and the average is what? 10. Okay, so 3 divided by 30, we get what? 10, 10 each. Okay, all right, now when we run this code again, it just works like the first one. We can put in any figure at all, any figure at all, any figure at all, and we can put in so many times as you want it, um, as you want it. Okay, so when you want to terminate the code, then you are good to go to type in your -1 and hit enter, and you have your results. Okay, the results are accurate. You can use a calculator to do the calculations, and you are good to go. Okay, so you might be asking, when should I use an array and when should I use a variable, and which one is better, and whatsoever be the case. Now I will explain, but before then, let me explain this concept one more time. Okay, now let's explain from the top as the compiler understand it. Okay, so now we create a float, and we give it what? An input of 1,000. So we give it an input of 1,000 because we want the user to stand a chance to be able to put in more content, okay, or type in more code. Okay, for instance, to try it at most 1,000 times. Okay, and no user is going to do that. Okay, so we don't want to do it 10, whereby the user might like to try it for maybe 11 times, which will not be accepted. Okay, so we put in 1,000, and so that the user can put in more effort. All right, so that's why we set it here. If the user want to terminate it, you can just type -1 to just terminate it, and he's good to go. And the next thing to talk about is what? Why we use float. Okay, so we use float. I explained it on our previous one. Okay, the variable one. We use float because the user is the one typing in the input. Okay, so if the user is the one typing the input, the user can choose to type a negative number. For instance, the user can type in what? A decimal number. If the user choose to type in maybe 50.5, and we set this one to an integer, it means the outcome, okay, the result that will be given to the user will not be accurate. Your answer will not be correct. All right, so that's why we are using a float, because the float has what it takes to carry the both decimals and whatever. All right, and here also we set the number of input to 0, and we make it an integer. Why did we make it an integer? We make it an integer because the number of inputs here, it is working at the same time as an index number. Okay, the number of inputs here, it is working as the index number, and by default the index numbers are what? Whole numbers. They are not decimals. Okay, for instance, it reads from 0, 1, 2, 3. There's no negative in it. Okay, so if you put here fruit, you might be having problem with your application. Okay, so here we give a float of total. Okay, so now the float of total, we set it to 0, and the reason why we use float is that after the user puts in everything, he's going to sum everything and give him the total. So if the total happens to be a decimal, then it can print it out correctly for the user to know the correct answer. Okay, so when you're using a float, it's good that way. All right, because when you make it an integer and the outcome become a decimal, it's going to omit all the where the decimal starts, all the numbers that follows will not come, which will not give us an accurate answer. So in that case, we did like that, and we do a cout for the user to input the first value, and the first value we assign it to what? The input, and we set it to be what? The index that will be given to the first value the user would input. All right, now we can see that our input here is the array, and every array has an index number. Okay, so we assign it to what? To the number of inputs, which is what? 0, assuming this will become our index number. Okay, because it is 0, so the first input that the user will be input, which is the array, okay, it will have the first index number of 0. Okay, before we move on to the while loop, for the while loop also to run it. So here with the while loop, we set the number of input to be 1,000. We set it like that for the user to have more rooms. Okay, just in case. Now, and we said here total plus equals input. Okay, so now when you use this one to explain it, you understand it better. So you can see the total is equal to total plus what? The input that the user will type. Now, what is total? Total is 0. Now, the total is going to depend on the input that the user will type, okay? So if the user type 100, then it is going to use the index number. With an array, it's not going to just look at what you are typing, but it's going to use its index number, okay? So that's why we assign the index number here, being what? The number of inputs, okay? So we set the same number of inputs as an index number. It's like we are using one stone to kill two birds. So in my language, I say yeah, the okay. All right, let's move on. So we assign it to the number of input because it is 0, okay? When the loops run for the first time, then here also will become 1, so that when the user stand a chance to type in again for the second time, the index number will become 1. Then it will go on and on and on and on, okay? All right, so we use the number of inputs plus plus because if you don't use the number of input plus plus, when we enter the second value here, it is going to overwrite it because it's going to use the same number. And when you use the same index number, it's going to overwrite the first input, okay? So when you type in 10 and type in 20, it's going to override the 10 and you are going to get the 20, okay? And we are dealing with array and we don't want to do that. That's why we are using the number of inputs plus plus so that it will create a different index number making what? 1, okay? So that it will have its unique identifier, so that we will have the next input as a unique number, okay? Not being overwritten like how the variable was overwriting it, okay? All right, so the if statement here is just helping us to terminate the program after the user has typed in enough inputs that he's satisfied with, okay? So that the next code here will run, okay, to give us the outcome of everything that we have done so far, okay? So it's as simple as that. All right, so that is that. Now you'll be asking what makes the difference, the array and the variable. What makes the difference? Which one should I code with? The array stand a chance, okay, of having more functionalities because with the array we are not overriding the variable, okay. The array stand a chance because with the array we are not overriding this variable here, okay, which is the input, okay. But with the variable, our second input is overriding it, okay. So since it is overriding it, it comes with its own limitations. For instance, with the array, I can add another functionalities here. I can say see out the value. So the value of index number, let's say 2, okay. The value of index number 2x. Then here I will say what? Inputs. Then with a square bracket, let me end it first. So inside this square bracket, then I put in what? 2. Now let's run it and see the magic, okay. Now enter the first value, I say 10, second value, I say 12, third value, I say 13, fourth value, 15, fifth, okay, the next value, I say 80. It doesn't really matter, I'm just inputting something. All right, now let me terminate the code. I'm okay, so I enter -1, and let's see the magic here. Now we have our total, okay, our summation, and we have the number of inputs, which is 6, and we have the average value, which is 25, and we can see the value of index number 2 is 13, okay. The value of index number 2 is 13. Now let's go and find out index number 2. So this one is what? 0, 1, and 2, and it is 13. Okay, so this is the advantageous side of using the array. Okay, so we can change this figure to anything. Okay, so let's say if you change this one to, okay, now let's change it to 0. Okay, so we change it to 0. Let's change the statement to 0, and let's run the code one more time. So 10, 10, 10, 1, 0, whatever, 30. Let's terminate the code. Then I will say -1. Then I hit enter, and you can see we for the first, second, third, we know it already. So what is most important to me is what? The value of the index number 0 is what? 10. So the index number 0 is what? The first one, okay, the first one, and we are getting it what? 10. Okay, so if this was supposed to be a names, okay, by just giving the index number and just hitting enter, you see that the person's name will be as well printed out. Okay, it is awesome, it is awesome. So now I will urge you to once again go through the code, just code with me as I've coded it here, do the same thing. Then for the second time, don't look at the code, but do it by yourself. When you are facing challenges, go back to the code and visit it once at a time. Then for the third time, you are going to build it without looking at the code at all. And for the fourth time, you are going to build it differently without using the figures and my expression. But just use any expression of yours and try to do anything for yourself. Okay. All right, guys, congratulations. If you're able to build this project, congratulations. But till we meet again, happy coding, take care, and have fun.